Here's the story from Legal Insurrection. Rep. Raskin in February, quote, "It's up to Congress to disqualify Trump if he wins. So it's going to be up to us on January 6th to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified." It's kind of wild to hear, and this story is going pretty viral, but Legal Insurrection did the groundwork sourcing this clip that's going viral with tens of millions of views on X. And it's sourced back to 5 months ago, back in February, on February 17th. Very few views, only 7,558 views, but somebody did find it. And so we have, in the full context, he's talking about actions they need to take. And, well, let's just play the clip so you can hear it for yourselves.
Constitutionalizing Jim Crow. And then it's not until the Warren Court for a couple of decades with the white primary cases and Brown versus Board where you get a different kind of Supreme Court on the side of the freedoms and equality of the American people. But the court is not going to save us. And so that means the only thing that really works is people in motion, amending the Constitution. But again, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient because what can be put into the Constitution can slip away from you very quickly. And the greatest example going on right now before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand, as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. And so, they want to kick it to Congress. So it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025, to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody in Civil War conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have not many cases to look at every year, not that much work to do, a huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job and interpret what the great 14th Amendment means. And I'm glad that Sherilyn's creating her new center so we can bring that back to life, even as we're continuing to amend the Constitution, as Professor Hassan has invited us to do.
What a wild thing to say to a group of people so casually, that we will need bodyguards for everyone's Civil War conditions. What he is saying, that if Donald Trump wins on January 6th, they must stop him from taking office. What do you think happens then?
Well, just remember, Tim, when they say our democracy, they mean theirs, not yours. Your vote apparently doesn't matter because they can disqualify your candidate if they don't like him. And so they've tried lawfare. They've tried just about everything else. One guy tried to even shoot him, right? And now we're at a point where, you Trump mobs, not our fellow citizens, not the people that might disagree with us on policy or candidate preferences. No, mobs. And, it just goes to show that when it comes to securing themselves, they will stop at nothing. When it comes to securing borders, not so much. But when it comes to fighting their fellow Americans and people that might disagree with them on policy, they'll pull out all the stops.
Right. To me, a lot of the messaging coming from Raskin and other high-ranking Democrats has always been not warning about potential political violence, but manifesting it, really just trying to say, this is how bad it is. And it's really, we don't know what could happen, but one of you maybe should do something about it. I mean, it's very strange and I think also divisive, right? This is the same party that'll turn around and say, we're the party of unity and we're togetherness and all this stuff. And then they're saying we have to do everything we can from our branch of government to not let the other team's person, take office if fairly elected. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think it's wild that Jamie Raskin thinks he knows better than the Supreme Court in so many
Well, they don't do any work, according to him.
And that he thinks they don't do any work and don't have any work to do all year. They do an enormous amount of work. They look at an enormous amount of cases and decide what they think actually could be in violation of the Constitution and, that they should hear it.
The other thing that always blows my mind about this, when you hear some of the people on the left talk about the Supreme Court, they have this idea that what the Supreme Court is supposed to do is essentially validate whatever leftist politicians want. And oftentimes they will criticize Supreme Court decisions where the Supreme Court comes back and says this needs to be solved by the legislature. Mm-hmm. And what do you mean it needs to be solved by the legislature? No, we just want you to issue down an edict.
We're supposed to do some work. What are you talking about?
Are you kidding me?
Well,
How dare you, sir?
That was a big deal with the EPA rules a couple of years ago. The Supreme Court said, hey, EPA, you can't force West Virginia to do all of these things because that's up to Congress to decide. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the key things that the court has been doing in this past term is, and in the past couple of terms is to tell these federal agencies that they are not actually authorized by Congress or the executive branch to put out all of these laws. I saw this interview with Mike Lee on Tucker Carlson that just dropped the other day, where Lee was talking about how on his desk he has 2 stacks of papers. I mean, he probably has more, but 2 stacks, one of laws that Congress has passed and one that's like the Federal Register that all the agencies have put out. And it's, you know, a couple thousand pages versus like masses and masses of thousands of pages that the Federal Register has put out. And it's like these edicts that all of these agencies just released to force Americans into doing things that how the agency interprets the law. And to a certain extent, how the president interprets the law. He's the one that puts out all these executive orders saying include more gender stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's the overturning Chevron was one of the best decisions the Supreme Court has made in my lifetime, simply because I don't think people fully understood what this was. The original Chevron decision essentially said that when an executive branch agency interprets the law in such a way, promulgates pages upon pages of regulations, can ruin your life, shut down your business, confiscate your property, the Supreme Court had said, well, we're just going to assume that the federal branch agency got it right. So when you bring a case before the Supreme Court or when you bring a case before a federal court, the burden is on you to prove that the federal agency got it right. We're not going to look at we're not going to look at the case before us and say, well, we're not going to assume the feds got it correct. So thank God they overturned Chevron. It was a ridiculous decision in the first place.
Yeah.
So this is pretty funny. I want to pull this up from the Bulwark. In this context of Civil War conditions, the Bulwark disagrees. They said that they simulated what would happen if Trump wins. And it's really funny because they actually say, you know, it's 2025, it's March, Trump is back in the White House. And I'm not going to read this bloviating garbage, but overall, they just say, like, we should worry less about the extremes, such as mass detentions, large-scale organized political violence, or the mass-scale domestic deployment of active-duty military forces to suppress lawful protests. They mentioned that Trump found it difficult to fully execute his most ambitious plans. Funny, because that's quite literally what every single one of us who says we want to support Trump has been saying. He's not going to be able to bring in the army. There's not going to be this like mass mobilization for deportation. I asked him, how do you mass deport? He says, with local police. So it's not going to be this large military operation. I have long said, if Trump wins, we're going to get a marginally good administration. We're going to see peace agreements. We're going to see better border security. None of it's going to be perfect. And we're going to go, it was pretty good, I guess. The economy is going to improve. Maybe many of you noticed the market crashing today because people are scared Kamala's going to win. Yeah, the Bulwark now going, actually, if Trump wins, it's probably going to be mostly the same. Mostly the same. Nothing crazy happens.
Dave Ramsey did this interview with Theo Vaughn, and Theo Vaughn was asking him like financial advice. And I remember Dave Ramsey going, you know, I've made money and lost money under all presidents. And so I think there is a level of like, it's not as hysterical as people who make money off of politics believe it's going to be. You know, part of what bothers me is sort of the hysteria that comes with all of this. Because you were mentioning Chevron earlier, and you know Chevron got marketed to the public as this is the Supreme Court saying you don't have to listen to experts.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like not it at all. This is just the misinterpretation from one side that has a bias. And I think that there is so much just anti whatever they're doing sentiment. And you do get it on both sides of the political aisle, but definitely from the left and progressive movement that they have made it this fear-mongering game that's ultimately extremely dangerous for or harmful for people who are trying to just live daily life.
I will say this, though. I think the thing that is different about this particular race is not just the fact that the left absolutely despises Donald Trump. I think it's also about this is the first time we will have an administration in my lifetime, both Trump and J.D. Vance, who are adamant that the biggest threat is an unelected executive bureaucracy that has just grown completely out of control. And they are looking for ways to go after that in a way that no president in my lifetime has. And the federal bureaucracy is going to defend itself. And so that's the part where I see this being different than previous races. Like I don't hold out a lot of hope that any politician is going to save us or any administration is going to be able to do it. But if there's one that will go after the federal bureaucracy hard, it's this one.
And what's more exemplary of the federal bureaucracy than a person who has just been installed as the Democratic candidate, right? Like you don't literally use their just like administrative power to be like, this is who it is now.
Yeah.
This is what I actually fear, though, right? A Donald Trump presidency is going to be presidency and administration will be marginally good. He's going to hire some bad people. Maybe he learned his lesson. He'll hire some better people. It'll be okay. We're going to be moderately happy with it. I think the economy being good means many people will be very happy with it. Kamala Harris has no policy positions on her website.
Nope.
She's not received a single vote. She was installed. And they're showing polls where she's within the margin of error of beating Trump. And if that happens, that's what really scares me. This is the powers that be saying, can we enact Chinese communist-style governance in the United States? Because if Kamala Harris wins, that's what it is. And it's unfortunate that it really comes down to Trump and oblivion. And I don't mean to say that Kamala Harris is going to be like Hitler or anything like that, although some guy from Splinter News, which used to be Fusion where I worked, actually believed my over-the-top tweet where I said she'd start 800 wars, and he thought it was real because they're not smart people.
Project Special
What I
K.
mean is Kamala Harris winning signals the end of the republic.
Yes.
I really do think if Kamala wins, you're going to wake up and you're going to buy bread. You're going to wake up, you're going to go to the store and get milk, bread, and eggs. You're going to turn on the TV and you're going to watch your Fox News or your Newsmax or your ABC, whatever it is you're watching. Kamala will be president. There will be there'll be expansion of war. There will be mass spending, and you will have no say and no power over it. It will not be a dramatic overnight end. People will not be rounded up and put in camps. None of that. It's just going to be the beginning of the end of the republic, which is no more representation by the people.
I think that's right. And we're seeing no representation by the people in the Democrat Party. And you also are seeing something which is fascinating, which is all of these Democrats saying, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And we like it this way. And please tell us what to do. Beat us some more. That is what we are into.
Can we also acknowledge too that when you talk about the reason why they were so upset about Chevron and this whole idea of like the experts now alone, that's always been the progressive objective. If you go all the way back to Woodrow Wilson, right? You have the president of Yale University that believed that, or was it Princeton? Sorry. He goes, what we need is wise experts within the bureaucracy that are going to run the country, and the Constitution stands in the way because it has all these checks on federal power. So this idea of experts running your life, managing the economy, that's the objective. It's not an...
Well, and the executive branch has been, what's the word? Conglomerating power, is that accurate?
Accumulating power.
Accumulating power for decades and decades and decades. I remember when they put through the Patriot Act, and I was just like, this is a horrifying accumulation of power.
And this was actually something great that Democrats gifted us in the first Trump administration. They say when God closes a door, he opens a window. Donald Trump being curtailed meant they were setting precedent against the power of the executive branch, often in bad ways, but in some ways still acceptable. So this means that hopefully after another Trump administration, we can set some standards and say, hey, here are the precedents set. But again, that being said, we've still seen Steve Bannon, and this is through Congress, go to jail, the DOJ deciding that Bannon and Peter Navarro should go to jail and Merrick Garland should not. So the challenge is, as much as I'm hoping to see a real curtailing of expanding executive authority, Democrats just abuse the system when they're in the executive branch anyway, and Republicans don't stop them.
No, I think that is absolutely the case, and that's why I feel, I don't know, I feel like something's different this time, and in part it's because, like, look, I'm part of that classical liberal group where I want to save the republic and I want to curtail federal power, but I also think we're in a situation right now where so many people on the right feel as if it's no longer good enough to say, well, imagine if we were in power and we did this. It's like, yeah, we've been saying that for decades. The left will be happy to use the curtailing power, the Constitution to curtail federal power when it doesn't suit them. And they will come right in and completely ignore it and rely on a federal bureaucracy, a compliant media, higher education. They will rely on all of that to back their play, because they're the good guys. So when they do it, it's for good and noble purposes. And when we do it, it's a complete violation of the constitutional process.
You're the oppressor.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.